Welcome to Gospel Tangents Podcast, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. We're continuing our conversation with George Throckmorton. He's the expert who discovered how Mark Hofmann was forging documents. Did you know that Mark actually used a toy chemistry set? It's pretty amazing. We'll also talk about another high-profile case that George was involved with, the Howard Hughes will. It's really interesting. Check out our conversation. Hey, one more thing. I just wanted to mention that the first 9 people who sign up for our Gospel Tangents Insider Club will be able to talk to me, and we're going to have our first Insiders Club meeting, tentatively titled How to Fool a Prophet for Profit. So it'll be about the Mark Hofmann forgeries and murders. So it'll be a lot of fun. We'll talk about some of the details that you may have missed previously, and we'll answer your questions. And so we want to just have you check that out. So it's free. Just go to tinyurl.com/GTinsider. You'll learn a little bit more information. It's going to be July 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So please check it out. I just want to mention a couple of other things. We've got our latest transcripts on sale with Jonathan Stapley, as well as if you would like to talk, we've got Shannon Flynn and Kurt Bench, who also work closely with Mark Hofmann. They tell some very interesting stories, much different than George does. Now back to our conversation. So how would you go about trying to find out if a document had been forged, just looked similar to someone's handwriting versus was legitimately their handwriting? How would you figure that out?
Well, there's many techniques, and that's why it takes 4,000 hours of training to do it. It's not like you see on television where they pick it up in 2 minutes, they give you a total description. The other thing that's a problem is there's 2 branches of science that examine handwriting, and the public doesn't understand that at all. One of them is called graphology. That's where they do the personality assessment of a person's writing. In fact, the Howard Hughes will, that was the big, if they remember the Howard Hughes will, he was the richest man in the world at the time. And when they found the will, which they call the Mormon will, I don't know how much you're familiar with this story.
We might have to schedule another interview.
Well, I got involved in that quite by accident.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
But I've been involved in basically many high-profile cases in Utah and around the country because of the way these things work out.
We're going to have another interview.
But anyway, that testimony in court on Howard Hughes' will was a result of having the graphologists testifying against the document examiners.
Oh my goodness.
Because they'll say, well, Howard Hughes would put a counterclockwise hook on his lower letter G, which means he has back problems. Howard Hughes did have back problems, so that's him. That's graphology.
Wow.
They'll tell you your personality. And that's something that's not valid in the field of documents. We take an average examination of a signature, for me, just an average signature is 1 to 3 hours. And there's so many factors. I use 21 different tests on a signature before I examine it. If you look at a document, you're looking at a whole lot more. And it's kind of interesting, the salamander letter, because so many people had authenticated it, including the FBI eventually got it, and they authenticated it. So when I was examining it, I spent 100 hours on a 1-page document, looking at everything I could think of, from water stains to marks on the paper, to erasures, to deletions, to chemical treatment, to handwriting itself, to the ink that was used, the pressure that was exerted, stuff like this. It's a very difficult examination to do. That's why in the United States there's about 300 to 400 is all document examiners in the whole United States and Canada that do the work.
Wow, that's crazy. So when you looked at the salamander letter, what was kind of the giveaway on that wasn't legitimate?
There was no giveaway on that. In fact, the salamander letter was not examined until about 4 or 5 weeks after I started examining documents.
So we're 2 or 3 months out now from the bombing.
The bombs took place October 15th, and we're into February or March before I even get the salamander letter.
Okay.
Because the FBI got it.
Oh.
And
so now let's just double check there, because you said it was about 6 weeks after that Dean Jesse had let you see the salamander letter? Or
that's correct.
Okay, and then from there it went to the FBI.
Well, I never saw the original document. I saw a photograph of the salamander letter from Dean.
Okay.
But in the process of doing that initial examination for him, it was not the salamander letter that tipped me off. It was that other letter, which was the General Dunham letter.
Okay.
That was the one I was concerned with. And we met with the representatives of the church. The attorney and myself did. We met with the attorney of the church. Now, attorneys are different than the representatives of the church. And there was quite a antagonistic meeting at that time. We had two of the representatives of the church there, one that was helping to run the library, and we went in and we requested, we said, we're investigating a possible forgery. We need some documents that Hofmann had that are in your possession. We need the original documents, and we want to examine them to see if there's forgeries. We haven't even talked about the salamander letter yet. Okay, we're talking about these others because the church never had the salamander letter at that time. And so, and I remember well, and it's not very flattering, but I remember well, the attorney for the church at that time would pound his hand on the desk when we would ask for something. He says, it's my job to protect President Hinckley and protect the church. You cannot have these documents. And we would talk, and the attorney for the district attorney's office would talk. I basically watched. And he said, but this is a homicide investigation. We need these documents. And we were meeting for them for at least 20 to 25 minutes with him pounding his hand on that desk at least 5 to 6 different times. And he said, okay, and the representatives from the church says, there's nothing secret about these documents. They've been published. They're in magazines. There's photographs of them. They can have them. It's my job to protect President Hinckley and protect the church. Finally, I got disgusted, and I got up and walked out while he's in there. And the attorney for the district attorney's office come running after me and says, George, you got to come back. We got to get these documents for our investigation. And as bullheaded as I was at the time, I says, I don't report to you. I work for the Attorney General's office, not you guys. And I says, I'm not going to deal with anybody like this. This is a homicide case. So I left. I got a call about 2 or 3 or 4 days later, something like that. He says, we're going to be meeting with Elder Dallin Oaks. Now, he was a former Supreme Court justice. He's a lawyer, BYU. He knows the law. So I thought maybe we can talk to him. Plus, he's an apostle. That helps. We walked in and sat down with him and explained what happened, and he was not pleased with what had previously happened. And he actually stood up, and he looked at me and he said, you will have the total and complete cooperation of the church. And he turned to me and he says, if there is anybody that is not cooperating with you, you let me know personally.
Wow.
And from then on, the doors were opened. We got anything I wanted. I got to go into what was affectionately called the super secret vaults of the church.
Oh, wow.
And they're really not that big. It's not that impressive. It is impressive, but they're not that secret. But some of the other people say they are. But anyway, I got to go any place I want and do anything I wanted. And that really turned the investigation around, because now a forensic examination of document means you have to compare a genuine document with something else, another document. And it's through the comparison of these known documents to the question document to see if it's genuine or not. Is it the same type of paper, the same type of ink, the same writing, the same circumstances of being stored? All of these things are a factor in it. But that was what actually changed the investigation around.
So Elder Oaks was really helpful to allowing more access.
Oh, absolutely. And there was no question. I had a lot of respect for him before, but I had even more respect after meeting with him in that meeting.
Oh, wow, that's great.
He wasn't happy. In fact, ironically, I heard, and remember, this is 30 years ago, so my memory's not exactly as sharp as it was, but they dismissed the whole law firm that had been with the church for years, and they got a new one.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
I understood it was because of that, but that's just my own understanding. Take it for what it's worth.
That's interesting.
All I know is there was a change in law firm shortly thereafter.
That's very interesting. So it was this Jonathan Dunham letter that kind of tipped you off a little bit. What were some things that you saw? Because originally, I guess you just saw a photograph, but there were some things there that tipped you off?
That's correct. It was actually a Xerox copy. But the one thing I noticed on the General Dunham letter was there was 2 different pens used, and the paper had 3 things on the side of it which indicated it was torn out of a book.
Oh.
And I'm looking, just logically, for no other reason other than a gut feeling, I'm thinking, here's some people, Joseph and Howard and a couple of others in Carthage jail. How many writing instruments would they have access to there? How many different types of paper would they have access to? Because I've got Dean provided me with other letters from Carthage jail that were written while they were in jail. So I'm comparing the other letters that were written to this General Dunham letter. Now, it certainly is possible that they had to use a different paper and they had to use a different pen. But I'm thinking, why? You're in jail. Do they give you a sample of pens? And that was my suspicions right there.
Oh, okay.
And I could see that 2 different pens were involved between I had 2 or 3 letters from the jail. And so it's just a gut feeling. But before I could do an examination, I needed the original.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I called him and says, there's a suspicion there may be some forgeries. I wasn't certain by any means. In fact, when I started doing the investigation, I called a document examiner friend of mine in Phoenix. And I find this interesting. His name is Bill Flynn. When I first got hired at the crime laboratory in 1981 in Utah, I went down to Phoenix and I worked with him and several others in the state crime laboratory down there. Bill is from Philadelphia, and he's, in my opinion, he's probably the foremost document examiner in the country.
Wow.
He's very intelligent and perceptive and so forth. And I got the chance to work with him down there for 2 weeks. I realized I'm in a can of hot water here because I'm a Mormon. These are Mormon documents. If I say they're forgeries, you're just saying that because you're a Mormon. If I say they're genuine, you're just saying that because you're a Mormon. I needed to find somebody else. I called Bill on the phone. And I thought it was funny. I called him and he answered the phone. I says, "Hi, Bill, it's George." "Oh, hi, how you doing?" I says, "What religion are you?" He kind of paused. He said, "Well, I'm Catholic, but I'm not active." I says, "Good." And then he said, "What's going on?" And I told him I had this investigation. So he helped me from there on for the next 6 months. He actually came up and spent 2 or 3 weeks with me working on some of the documents here. The rest of the time he was in Phoenix doing his regular job. In addition, he was doing other things. So we communicated about every day for 6 months. I was working on part of the case, part of the evidence. He was working on other evidence. And can I tell a sidelight?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. We're gospel tangents. We can go off on tangents.
Oh, good. He was working on the ink, and he got some old ink recipes, and we had a problem with how to make the ink, because what we're trying to do is duplicate the Hofmann documents. And he was working on the ink. I was working on other aspects of the paper and other things. But anyway, and he looked in some old history books and found some ink formulas for the ink that was used at that time in the 1830s and so forth. And it was basically iron gallatanic ink that was used. And they told how to make the ink. They had the formula. There was green copperas and Roman vitriol and gum arabic and other things like that. And so he went out and we tried to find these chemicals. And I tried to help him with that, and we contacted the chemists at the lab, PhD chemists, and we contacted the chemists at the universities, and so they'd never heard of these chemicals. And anyway, so he made some which he thought were comparable to some of these other things, but we couldn't find gum arabic. And we looked everywhere. And gum arabic it's a thickening substance they use in soft drinks and gravies and stuff like that. So it's out there, but where do we buy it? And more importantly, where would Mark Hofmann buy it? Finally, he says, my brother works at the Food and Drug Administration in Washington, D.C. He just got hired there about 2 or 3 months ago. Maybe I ought to give him a call. So as Bill related the story to me, he says, I called him up. I hadn't seen him for a long time. And they talked for a few minutes, and he says, well, the reason I'm calling, I wonder if you could help me. I'm trying to find some gum arabic. He said there was a silence on the phone. He says, why do you need gum arabic? And he says, we're involved in an investigation. And he said, it's interesting you ask. I have been assigned to be in charge of all the gum arabic. I have, I'm looking at it right now in the library, every publication that's ever been printed on gum arabic. What do you need?
Wow.
So it's a coincidence, as some people say. That's what Bill said. He said, isn't that a coincidence? But anyway, that's a sidelight on that. And that's
so what is gum arabic? Does it have a different name now? Or?
No, it's still called gum arabic. In fact, later on, we made some ink, Bill did, that worked. And we found out, and I was looking at how did they artificially age it and so forth. And between the two of us, we found out that you can artificially age iron gallatanic ink by several different methods. An easy one is simply put it in the oven, because it accelerates the heat process and the aging process. And Mark tried that on some of it, by the way.
Okay.
He experimented with several different forms of doing it until he found the one that was easiest and most popular, which was a chemical treatment. But anyway, and we finally found the chemicals. And the chemicals we found over a year after the bombs. It was in November of 1986. The bombs were in October of 85. And I was out Christmas shopping in a toy store and happened to glance down at a toy chemistry set. And right there was gum arabic, Roman vitriol, copperas, and a recipe on how to make iron gallatanic ink.
No way, that's crazy.
And later on, we found out that's where he got the chemicals, was at a toy store.
At a toy store.
And yet they fooled the biggest laboratory in the world, the FBI.
So, yeah, that's crazy.
They're looking for a more sophisticated way of doing things today than what he used. He used the method that was used 150 years ago. And we don't deal with things 150 years old. We deal with modern, at the time, forgeries on checks and stuff like that, credit applications. And we're very proficient at that. But even in the field of document examination, we couldn't go to anybody to get help because we don't deal with documents over 50, 60 years old.
Oh, that's crazy. So he was able to fool the FBI as well.
Oh, yeah. On the one document, the Oath of a Free Man, which he was trying to sell for $1.5 million at the time the bombings occurred. The document had been authenticated by the FBI, the American Antiquarian Society, the Library of Congress, an independent laboratory in Dallas, and also in Kansas City.
That's like six different organizations, right? So he was able to fool 6 organizations with a toy store chemistry set.
In fact, the fun thing in my career there, the New York Times wrote in an article, they said everybody says it's genuine except some two-bit hick in Utah. So I didn't have that moniker placed on my desk. But ultimately, we were proven to be right because, in fact, all of the books that were written back then were wrong. We had to do the proper examination, research, and so forth to find out why. One of the things is the book said that ink will crack as it grows older. That is not absolutely correct, and that's one of the problems with science. We have some egotistical scientists in this world, believe it or not, that say my way is the only way. And there's always another way to do something, it seems like. They may be right many times, but there's a way of fooling them, and that's what Mark Hofmann did.
Wow. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with George Throckmorton. In our next conversation, we'll talk a little bit about sports memorabilia. Even if you're not a sports fan, I'm pretty sure you've heard of this guy that George was checking out.
I had a Babe Ruth jersey that was selling for $750,000.
Oh my goodness.
That had been authenticated. But it wasn't, because the ink that was used to sign it wasn't made until Babe Ruth died in 1948, and the ink wasn't made until 1972. So if it had been genuine, he would have had to have been resurrected and signed his name again.
I hope you enjoyed that short clip from our next interview. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please go to our patreon.com/gospeltangents and subscribe for just $5 a month. If you'd like a transcript of this, please click the yellow subscribe button at gospeltangents.com, and I'll send you this and all future transcripts. Also, if you'd like a paperback like we've got here, those are available at our website at amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents. Please get all updates at our Facebook page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. We're also on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. You can also get transcripts individually at our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. Finally, make sure that you subscribe on our Apple Podcast page. Just do a quick search for Gospel Tangents there and give us a 5-star review while you're at it. Thanks again for listening. Your support helps create more Mormon history classes and podcasts such as this, and so I really appreciate you listening. Please share with your friends. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some more of our great videos. Thanks again.